Imagine a silent night in Jerusalem, interrupted by the sound of hurried footsteps and whispered voices. Two of the city's most powerful men, Annas and Caiaphas, were scheming behind the scenes. Their target? Jesus, the man whose message was shaking the very foundations of religious and political power. But what truly drove these leaders to conspire against him? Fear, ambition, or something even darker? Throughout this video, you will uncover the secrets behind their choices, the intrigues that brought a city to ruin, and the message of forgiveness that defied time and continues to transform lives to this day. Annas and Caiaphas are names that resonate at the most critical moment in Jesus' life, representing unparalleled power and influence in Jerusalem. Annas, the father-in-law of Caiaphas, had previously held the position of high priest, an office that was officially rotational but, in practice, carried lifelong significance among the Jews. Even after leaving the role, his authority behind the scenes remained unquestionable, shaping both religious and political decisions. Caiaphas, on the other hand, as the acting high priest, was the public face of religious power, yet his actions often reflected the interests of the dynasty controlled by Annas. The temple in Jerusalem, a symbol of Jewish faith, was also the political and economic epicenter, managed as a tool to preserve the privileged status of these leaders. Beneath the spiritual facade, their alliances with Rome secured their positions, even at the expense of sacred principles. But what truly drove these men to conspire against Jesus? The answer goes beyond theology. To Annas and Caiaphas, Jesus represented an existential threat to the system that upheld their power. His teachings openly challenged the hypocrisy and corruption of religious leaders, drawing crowds and planting seeds of rebellion. He was not just a charismatic figure, he was a force shaking the very foundations of a Jerusalem where religion and politics were inseparable. Jerusalem was a powder keg, with Roman oppression fueling popular discontent and messianic expectations running high. In this volatile context, Annas and Caiaphas had to balance their loyalty to Rome with the fulfillment of Jewish traditions while striving to preserve their privileges. Jesus, with his message of love and closeness to God, embodied the threat to the stability and control they exercised over the people. Scripture reveals that Annas and Caiaphas were not mere bystanders to the events leading to the crucifixion. They were at the center of the decisions. Caiaphas, in particular, is remembered for his cynical and pragmatic declaration, "It is better for one man to die for the people than for the whole nation to perish." This statement encapsulates the logic of leaders who prioritized preserving the status quo over truth or justice. However, the story of Annas and Caiaphas transcends manipulation and power. It is a reflection on the consequences of choices driven by fear and convenience. Their names remain as reminders of the price of abusing religious authority, which can lead to spiritual destruction and historical condemnation. And for us, this story raises a profound question: what are we prioritizing in our own lives? Are we aligned with eternal principles, or are we compromising our integrity for fleeting gains? The connection between religion and politics in Jerusalem during the time of Annas and Caiaphas was so intertwined that it seemed impossible to separate them. These leaders not only wielded spiritual authority but also played central roles in the political alliances that kept the Jewish elite in power. Even after leaving his official position, Annas continued to exert immense influence, acting as a behind-the-scenes strategist. Meanwhile, Caiaphas, as the high priest, served as the visible link between the Sanhedrin, the religious council, and the Roman authorities. However, their leadership was far from an example of spiritual purity. It was built on a foundation of intrigue, compromises, and often betrayal. One of the most striking episodes of this intrigue was the conspiracy to capture Jesus. His words and actions not only challenged the hypocrisy of the religious leaders but also shook the power structure that Annas and Caiaphas fought to preserve. Every miracle, every parable, and every public confrontation posed a direct threat to their authority. This was not merely a religious issue. For them, Jesus was a political risk. His growing popularity could easily alarm the Roman authorities, leading to severe reprisals against the Jewish leadership. The plan to capture him was therefore not just a matter of doctrine but also a strategy to maintain the delicate balance of power. The actions of Annas and Caiaphas exemplify how power, when misused, can corrupt even the most sacred systems. They transformed the temple in Jerusalem, a place of worship, into a hub of political negotiations and manipulations. The commerce that Jesus drove out with such indignation was only the tip of the iceberg. Behind the scenes, Annas and Caiaphas were playing an elaborate game of chess, moving pieces to protect their hegemony. But in doing so, they not only betrayed their spiritual integrity but also the very purpose of their priestly roles. The dynasty of power they built was sustained by carefully woven alliances, but these alliances often required compromises that placed their interests above the needs of the people. This system became a tool of oppression, where judgments were manipulated to eliminate threats and consolidate the dominance of religious leaders. The conspiracy against Jesus was the most emblematic example, but it was not the only one. Other prophets and spiritual leaders who dared to challenge the status quo also faced persecution. This manipulation of judgments serves as a timeless warning. How often, in pursuit of our own interests, do we sacrifice truth and justice? The story of Annas and Caiaphas invites us to look inward and reflect on the choices we make when confronted with power. Can we resist the temptation to compromise our values, or do we succumb to the desire to preserve our privileges at any cost? The trial of Jesus, overseen by Caiaphas and influenced behind the scenes by Annas, stands as one of the darkest and most pivotal moments in the biblical narrative. On a night marked by tension, intrigue, and manipulation, Jesus was first brought to the house of Annas and then to Caiaphas. The Sanhedrin, a council of elders, priests, and scribes, was hastily convened in a session that violated numerous legal norms of the time. Under the guise of legality, this trial was nothing more than a desperate attempt to silence a voice that threatened the existing religious and political system. The climax of this trial came with Caiaphas' statement, "It is better for one man to die for the people than for the whole nation to perish." What might sound pragmatic concealed deep cynicism and served as a justification for the sacrifice of an innocent man. To Caiaphas, Jesus was not just a preacher, he was a real threat to the political stability of Jerusalem and, by extension, the consolidated power of the religious leaders. This decision was not made in the pursuit of truth but as a calculated move to preserve the balance of power that upheld their privileges. During the trial, witnesses were summoned to present accusations against Jesus, but their testimonies were contradictory and insufficient for a legitimate conviction. Nevertheless, Caiaphas pressed on, directly challenging Jesus about his identity as the Messiah and the Son of God. When Jesus affirmed it, stating that the Son of Man would come in glory, Caiaphas reacted theatrically, tearing his robes in a gesture of indignation and declaring that no further witnesses were needed. The sentence was sealed: Jesus must die. This trial not only highlighted the crisis faced by Jesus but also exposed the hypocrisy and corruption of a system that was meant to be a beacon of justice. Annas and Caiaphas, instead of using their positions to uphold truth, manipulated the circumstances for their own gain, betraying the very principles they had sworn to protect. Yet, this moment of deepest darkness also revealed the light of Jesus' sacrifice and love. He faced his condemnation with serenity, fully aware that his mission transcended suffering. His response to the accusations, free of anger or hatred, became an eternal lesson in faith and forgiveness. This story is also an invitation to introspection. How do we deal with the injustices we face? Are we quick to judge without seeking the truth, or are we willing to stand for justice even when it demands personal sacrifice? The trial of Jesus challenges us to reflect on the cost of integrity and the courage required to uphold it in the face of adversity. The fate of Annas and Caiaphas serves as a testament to divine retribution that often transcends human intentions and the passage of time. After the crucifixion of Jesus, these leaders continued to hold positions of influence for a while. However, the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD marked the end of an era, dismantling not only the temple but also the power structure that upheld their authority. For many scholars, this event is interpreted as divine judgment upon a leadership that had strayed from the principles of justice and righteousness. Caiaphas, a central figure in the trial of Jesus, did not escape the consequences of his actions. He lost his position as high priest and faded from the pages of history, leaving behind only the echo of his deeds in the drama that changed the course of humanity. Annas, on the other hand, lived long enough to witness the downfall of the power dynasty he had built. The fall of both men symbolizes the fragility of human power when built on foundations of injustice and manipulation. The destruction of Jerusalem was a cataclysmic event that deeply marked Jewish history and spirituality. The temple, the heart of the people's faith and identity, was reduced to ashes. Yet, this tragedy also serves as a warning about the cost of straying from divine principles. Annas and Caiaphas, who worked so hard to maintain their control over the temple, saw it destroyed as a direct consequence of their choices. However, even in the face of devastation, the story does not end in despair. The destruction of Jerusalem was not merely an act of judgment, it was also an opportunity for reflection and renewal. The events that followed the fall of the temple led the Jewish people to reevaluate their practices and seek a deeper, more authentic connection with God. For Christians, the fate of Annas and Caiaphas is a powerful reminder that, even in the darkest moments, God is at work bringing light and redemption. Their tragic ends teach us that human power is fleeting, but the love and justice of God are eternal. This perspective not only offers comfort but also guidance for those facing challenges and injustices in their own lives. And what about you? How do you interpret this story? Share your thoughts in the comments and pass this video along to someone who might find inspiration in this transformative message. Even in the face of betrayal, false accusations, and the brutality of his crucifixion, Jesus chose forgiveness as his response. Amid pain and suffering, his words on the cross echoed as a cry of compassion that has transcended centuries. "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." This act, of unimaginable depth, transcended its historical moment to become one of the most transformative messages in the entire biblical narrative. While religious leaders like Annas and Caiaphas resorted to manipulation and violence to preserve their positions, Jesus demonstrated that true power lies in unconditional love and the ability to forgive. The contrast is as striking as it is impactful. While Annas and Caiaphas sacrificed an innocent man to maintain their privileges, Jesus gave his life for all, including those who condemned him. This act of forgiveness is not just an example of greatness, it is a powerful invitation. How often are we enslaved by grudges or allow bitterness to dictate our actions? Jesus' attitude challenges us to seek reconciliation, even in the most challenging circumstances, and to break cycles of hatred and resentment. Yet, the message of Jesus goes beyond forgiveness, it is a declaration of love and hope. His sacrifice shows us that God's mercy surpasses any sin, and his resurrection confirms that love is stronger than hatred and even death itself. It is a timeless lesson that continues to inspire billions, reminding us that even in the darkest moments, there is always a light guiding us toward renewal and eternal life. For those who witnessed the crucifixion, these words marked something far greater than they could comprehend. Even among those who participated in his condemnation, like the Roman centurion who stood at the scene, there were those who recognized the uniqueness of Jesus. He did not merely preach about forgiveness, he lived it to the very last moment, showing that love and compassion can triumph over violence and injustice. Today, the message of Jesus remains as urgent as it was in his time. We live in a fragmented world where grudges and divisions spread easily. Jesus invites us to choose a different path, to let go of bitterness, embrace compassion, and transform our lives through love. After all, how can we expect to receive forgiveness if we are unwilling to grant it? The story of Annas and Caiaphas teaches us that our choices have the power to shape not only our own destinies but also those of the people around us. In contrast, the forgiveness of Jesus shines a different path, inviting us to seek love, justice, and reconciliation, even in the face of the greatest betrayals and injustices. And you, which part of this story touched your heart the most? Share your thoughts in the comments and help spread this powerful message by sharing this video with someone who could benefit from it. Our channel is filled with stories that transform perspectives and inspire change. Don't miss the chance to explore more reflections that can reshape your views on faith, power, and forgiveness. Subscribe now, turn on notifications, and discover the impact these stories can have on your life.